So we're going to kind of just jump into it, and we want this to be interactive, as Danielle was saying, and we're going to ask you to actually pull out your phones here in a minute, and we're going to do some surveying. But since this is about productivity, I think many of you feel this, but the data, there's absolute proof in this. And then Danielle, I'm assuming my screen is being shared. Yep. Okay, great.
That is
Um,
correct.
so over the past 50 years, really since 1970, construction productivity has stagnated and or decreased across the major indexes, where when we look at the graph here, the U.S. economy has steadily increased. And I think we being in the construction industry really feel that, but why is that happening? And then what can we do now? There's not really easy solutions to this, and kind of how do we adapt, or how do we deal with our bubble, our people? How do we get the best out of who we have on site? So with that, we're going to kind of jump into the Mentimeter. I'm going to pop out into here. Oh, we're going to go back. Hold on a sec. There we go. So if you pull out your phones, open up your cameras, you can use the QR code, or if you're at your computer, you can go to thementi.com and use that code. And we'll start, as you start to engage, yep, there we got one. So I can kind of see in the bottom right with a little thumbs up of those who are getting online. Got three. And Danielle, how many do we have in the audience right now?
I'm seeing about 10 or so attendees. I do see three ones in the in the attendee group as well. And I have scanned the code. I'm one of the four attendees who are on the Menti.
Okay.
Just for those of you who are with us at home, this is the view that I'm seeing. So just a blue screen waiting on these questions to start popping up.
So I got about six now, so I'll go ahead and kind of jump into the questions. Even if you're on your phone, you can go to thementi.com. You can use the code. You can see it at the top of the screen here, so you can join at any time. So the question should have popped up on your screen. Go ahead and why is construction productivity stagnated over the past 50 years? We kind of threw some of those things out there as we were discussing before, but I want to hear from you. You're the industry experts. You're dealing with it every day. What else is it that is causing this stagnation in the industry? It's it's when you look at construction, it's roughly 3 to 4% of the GPD of the United States. And if we could increase construction productivity, what it actually adds to the bottom line, the amount of waste is pretty staggering. There's one study in home building or residential construction that says 85% of the time spent trying to build a home is either waiting on materials or workforce, and then rework. So, it's kind of crazy to think how much time is wasted just in a residential home build, and how much time can be made up in that just wasted time and waiting for materials or workforce. And workforce is right there as one of the responses. A lot on the labor.
So workforce is getting older with less replacements. It's interesting. Why don't younger people find themselves gravitating to this, especially with college degrees being so expensive?
Right. So I
And
going to high school in the 80s/90s, I remember the poster on the wall, kind of trying to get you to come to college. Like, hey, you want to be in the working force. And there was the gentleman with the suit on, successful, briefcase, and then kind of, you don't want to be this. And it was a construction worker.
right.
So there's been, since 70s, 80s, like this push to go to college, and that, hey, this isn't necessarily a noble career. And that's really an industry-wide phenomena. How do we change that kind of industry? And this is where it's tough, because you, on the project level, how do you then help with the workforce? How do you get college students engaged? How do you, our college students or high school students, how do you get the persona changed of what it means to be a construction worker and back to a tradesperson, back to something that's skilled? Dan, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's changing. I definitely over the last few years, there's been a lot of shift in the conversation publicly around the value of a college degree and all the debt that that it ensues, and the fact that you can go into the trades and do quite well and having financial independence fairly quickly. I think this is a much easier sell today in 2024 than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah. I think some of the other things that come up within the industry is fragmentation. When you look at productivity and what used to be even 30, 40 years ago, your workforce could do multiple things. And now it has gotten so fragmented and so specialized that they only, your workforce is only skilled at doing a singular activity. I'm just a finisher. Like before they, you come in, they'd frame the walls, hang the drywall, finish it. And now that's 3 separate trades, in many cases, depending where you're at. When you also look at it, kind of poor equipment, you take a look at a bulldozer today and a bulldozer 50 years ago. Like, how much has changed? Okay, yeah, we've got joysticks now and electronics versus levers. And you've got some now GPS starting to get on the front of that to where your elevations and kind of changes in that. But take a look at a factory floor 50 years ago to a factory floor today, and how many less people are actually on that factory floor. The shortage in skilled labor is absolutely there. Overtime, compressing schedules. We look at kind of the safety aspects. We all have that safety mindset, but still an accident or injuries occur to an already depleted workforce. What can that do? Anyone have any comments on this that, now that we've kind of talked about it, you want to throw anything in the chat or just raise your hand? If you raise your hand at any point in time, Danielle will go ahead and let you speak and unmute your mic, but we want to hear from you as we go through this.
Yep, no questions in the chat right now, but if
Alrighty.
you have any questions, you can chat them in, or you can ask to be brought on screen, and if you would prefer to ask your question verbally.
Sure. So on to the next question. What are the typical people issues you deal with internally? So inside your company. Because, what we deal with every day, I think the other thing that's really shifted within the industry, design, bid, build, kind of traditional hard bid versus construction management, negotiated type work. And design, bid, build, you're a product company. You're producing a product, you hand the keys over at the end, you're more in control, or used to be more in control of your destiny. CM, you're now a service provider. So, how your people interact with the client, but even internally, it's a lot different mentality than what used to be in the industry. Got any responses out there? There we go. High turnover at entry level. I'd like to hear it, whoever responded to that, if you're willing to speak up. I would love to hear kind of why you think that turnover is happening at the entry level position. Is that entry level field kind of worker? Or is that entry level management supervision? Again, chat or raise your hand. We'll unmute your mic. Lack of loyalty? Yeah, absolutely. It's about their brand. Generation gaps, different levels of professionalism. Absolutely. Entry level field. Yeah, with the high turnover, I'm assuming that's probably back to that high turnover rate. Is that because the work's hard? Is it unrewarding? Is it they don't have the grit to get in there and do it every day? Is there easier opportunities other places? chasing the
American.
dollar. I think the loyalty is a huge one. Dan, generationally, what do you see generationally?
Um, so I think, people have been complaining about the younger generations literally for 3 or 4 thousand years. When we have a generations program, and one of the first things I like to do is bring up a quote that's literally from ancient Greece, complaining about the younger generation. So been around for a while. And think of the generation gap as an expectation gap. And if a younger generation is coming in with expectations that are not aligned with reality, that's a product of poor parenting and poor schooling. And if you can take a more compassionate approach to that, it's not their fault. It's just not the fault of a younger person that they come into the working world, well, let's just be real, clueless about what it takes to actually build a career and be successful and be an independent adult. They just don't understand it. Why don't they understand it? Again, poor parenting, poor cultural influences. So unfortunately, for a lot of organizations, it is incumbent upon you to educate. And instead of just writing them off and saying they're lazy, they're entitled, all of the stereotypes, to actually say, wait a minute, this is a human being that wants to be successful like I want to be successful, but I have an advantage over them. I wasn't raised the way they were. And so they need a little bit of help. I think if we take a more compassionate approach to that, then we get a lot more out of our younger employees. If we just write them off, it might feel good in the moment, but you're the one left holding the bag, right? Because you don't have enough young people there doing what they need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jim, that's great as far as enjoy teaching the younger generation. It's as you grow in your career, and handing that knowledge back down is a huge gift, not only to the person, but to the organization. All right. So what are the typical communication issues you deal with when working with subcontractors or suppliers? Like what seems to always kind of resonate or come up with communication with them, or lack of communication? Like, it's is it they didn't get the full understanding? Is it they're not reading what they're supposed to do? What are those communication issues that you have? The poaching side, I see that one on kind of the external threats, absolutely, with social media and everything else, and just personal brands. We go back to the loyalty of one of the answers, no loyalty in the workforce. And, they're taught to have their own personal brand. Using the proper software to communicate, subs won't use the new technology. Right, huge barrier. And so you talk about productivity, and now you're having to communicate on 3 or 4 different platforms. Absolutely. How many of them still use fax machines? Probably not that bad, but yeah. Absolutely. Fear of consequences, having difficult conversations. Absolutely. Failure to follow up. Yeah, I got it. And then you don't hear from them again. And that's, back on as a general contractor, are you following up with the sub? Sometimes we say they got it and we move on, but yeah, they often get busy or forgetful or distracted. Any others out there? So we're going to keep on the communication side of this. So we talked about subcontractors and suppliers. Let's also take a look at when working with owner groups. What are those communication challenges you deal with when working with owner groups? Are they the same challenges? Is it technology? Is it the not adopting that technology, or is it too much technology? So now you've got the owners pushing that down onto you. So kind of bottom up to then, I'm assuming most of everyone on the call here is a general contractor. Jeremy, I saw you join in. I know you're in the subcontracting world. But how does that work?
Is there typically an expectation gap, Matt, when it comes to owner groups and GCs?
I think it's less than probably GCs to subcontractors.
Hmm.
I think, and part of that then even depends on your contracting type. So if I've negotiated 5 contracts with an owner and then the owner says, you know what, I'm going to do hard bid because I think I'm going to save money. And now you're a hard bid contractor for that same owner that you were negotiating or a construction manager for, expectations are different in how you service them. Because back to now I'm delivering a product to you because it was hard bid versus I'm your construction manager, I'm your partner through this. And that gets tough when you have that kind of switch over in relationship. Dealing with owners is managing expectations, absolutely. Establishing that initial trust. So here you are trying to establish initial trust through the pre-construction process, and you have escalation at 15%, and they're not trusting your numbers right off the bat. That's really a fun time, isn't it? Clear expectations from day one. Yeah, expectations is huge. Absolutely. So we're going to keep working with the communication questions. So when you kind of tally that up, we talk about our internal communications, our internal kind of working with our people. We talk about working with subs, that follow-up, that, hey, I didn't get it, now I need to send another email. You talk about owner expectations and explaining and having to explain again what's happening. How much time are you using a week to solve these issues? And we got the choices there at the bottom. You should see that on your phone. You kind of got a multiple choice on this one. But how much time is being used in solving these issues? In a given week. Are you spending a day over communicating? So if we look at that kind of 3 to 5 or 5 to 8 hours, so let's just pick 5 hours. So 5 hours a week, and let's say, just for round numbers, that you pay your senior project manager with burden, or senior superintendent with burden, $100 an hour. Just again, simple math, probably not that far off. So 5 hours, that's $500 a week. That's being spent just on communication issues. And in some cases, that's going to be more. In some cases, that's going to be less. But just in communication issues, 5 hours a week, $500. So now let's multiply that by 52 weeks. Let's say it takes a couple weeks off. Simplicity's sake, we use 50 weeks. So now we're what? $25,000? Did I do the math right? So if we could put $25,000 back in your pocket outside of the time lost. So now let's talk about the other burdens associated with that, right? Now I get
How about all
burnout
the stress? How about all the stress, and conflict, and
frustration, and the cursing of the youth. It's the younger one. This pitting against each other. Now we're in extremely adversarial relationships. So outside of just the dollar figures, just everything else on the mental side of it. And with youth coming in that has a lower capacity to handle mental stress because they typically haven't been taught to fail. And being taught to fail, just whether that's through sports, whether that's through school, like how many kids, what's the graduation rates now compared to 20, 30 years ago? Like to graduate high school is to be expected. Like if you don't graduate high school, what accomplishment is that? If you just show up, you should be able to graduate high school. Okay, I'm over dramatizing it here, but still, you get my point. How have project management challenges limited construction productivity for the past 50 years? Like what on the management side is inhibiting productivity from increasing? We've got great programs out there now. You talk about management programs over the last 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. You look at the integration of iPads, all management tools that should be increasing productivity. But is it? Is it having that effect? Like what is getting in the way of that productivity on the management side?
It's an interesting question if if all the technology has actually, from a metric perspective, increased productivity.
Yeah. Because right now, when we look at the statistics of your FTEs, that hasn't happened. And I think you had some technology increases in the 60s and 70s that were like or 50s and 60s that were very practical, and technology increases, easy to use. So external delays, not getting pay apps in on time, increased administrative paperwork, duality, multiple technologies, absolutely. Yeah, right. I mean, electronic plans, getting things out. I remember rolling up, 50 sets, 150 sets of plans and specs, and subs driving in to pick up plans and specs to do an estimate. Now it's a click of a button and it gets sent out to the whole bid list. But it's still there. Productivity still isn't increasing. So what slows down job site performance? So I don't want to talk about tangible issues here. I don't want to talk about weather, material delays. I got them in there. Okay, yeah, let's get away from that, because to a certain point we can't control weather. The information delays, can come in. The material delays. We didn't get this. The transformer isn't coming in for 52 weeks. Okay, got it. Just day to day, what slows down performance? Is it back to just skilled labor or the workforce? There's one kind of key response here that I haven't seen, that I'm kind of surprised in today's workforce. Like, what's a barrier on the site every day, and most construction sites? Manpower is part of it. So if I've got the manpower out there, I don't have enough, or it's not skilled. But what also inhibits productivity? So I leave science so you all feel uncomfortable and you start actually giving me responses. Language barriers. Absolutely. I think, you talk about 30, 40 years ago, the amount of non-English speaking 30 or 40 years ago to today. And absolutely, I don't want to take anything away from non-English speaking workforce. Maybe we as English speakers need to learn the other languages, because how do we communicate with them? And as leaders, we should be adapting to the workforce around us. Do we need interpreters? I mean, the Google interprets, the different apps that are out there right now, it should be making things better as you go. Additional paperwork. Yeah, I think even on the previous one, again, multiple data inputs, like the technology has created more paperwork, more tracking, more data, and we haven't gotten to the point where we're actually using it yet. Absolutely. Oops, you had one more in there. I just want to see that before we move on. Lack of products on the shelf. Yeah, I mean, it's the real-time delivery and not having that in place. So now let's take a look at the whole project team. And how would you describe that low-performing construction team? And my guess is probably 70% of your projects you would say are low-performing, is my guess. Because we want to know kind of what are you seeing out there and describing those low-performing construction teams. I'm looking down as I take notes as you guys bring things in. And this is across the board. This is your project. This is internally. This could be departments. When we talk about teams, a lot of the same principles apply to low-performing teams and high-performing teams. So not properly staffed, lack of communication, lack of leadership. Absolutely. And so,
curious, Matt, I'm curious, just a quick question.
Yeah.
do your organizations prioritize the training internally or externally of best practices on communication, best practices on leadership? Is that something that's actually taught in your company, or is it assumed in the chat?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, throw them in the chats. Yeah, but I would say a majority are going to say it's assumed. Not to influence the answer that I just did, but
Sorry, Matt. I mean, it's just curious.
yeah. Poor job site cleanliness. Morale, absolutely. What causes those? I mean, not properly staffed 10 years ago. You're using the same staff you did 10 years ago. Why do you need more staff now, right? That's always a tough one. But we go back to more paperwork, duplicity in what we do, less skilled workers. That all requires more supervision in order to get it done. Missed deadlines. Absolutely. So why are you missing deadlines, with a poor performing team? What's the cause of that? So that's a symptom, that's a result. The question is, what causes that, and how do we fix that cause? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Now I want to put a happy vibe in. I want to put a smile on your face, and I want you to think about that construction project that went really well. The one you think back on in your career and you're like, I would get back with that team again. Like, that project kicked butt. Those people were great. It went so smooth. We made our fee. We didn't have fee erosion. We were on time. Like, on time and on budget are great, but you have fee erosion, you hate each other, like, you get done and you want to work together again. What was that about that project, that team, that made the difference? What did someone do or that team do that caused or that allowed it to operate at a different level than other projects? Yeah, Jim, trying to do less with more due to the budget. Absolutely. Budget can dictate staffing on projects. Absolutely. Had weekly family lunch, daily 15-minute huddles. So that kind of, those touch points daily to make sure you're communicating, you're getting outside of the typical work environment, bringing the family in, getting to know each other at a different level, cared for, and communicate with each other. Yeah, a genuine enjoyment of being around each other, friendships, properly staffed, culture was great. Client was a team player, huge one. Design team, again, they were accountable. They were hitting their deadlines. Like, how many times does a contractor get affected by the designers missing a schedule, yet they never seem to be held accountable like we are as general contractors? Sub-appreciation events. Absolutely. Strong leadership, skilled workforce. Do unions, those of you that deal in unions, are they providing a more skilled workforce, or are they having the same issues with skilled workers? Kind of back to the chat box, or if you raise your hand, we can get you engaged. So I'm going to pull some themes out of here. You got, communication, culture, properly staffed is huge. Kind of engagement, strong leadership. You got a competent workforce. Controlling what you can control. So Jim, in the chat box, yeah, the design team is always behind, but yeah, I think that's a good one as far as general attitude. Control what you can control. And if you can control those things, it's going to be better. But if you wrap yourself around worrying what you can't, then you're expending energy that you don't have. All right. So let's jump back. It's a great interaction. We appreciate it for sure. And you talk about high-performing teams. It's something that probably about 6, 7, 8 years ago, I was working with Brad Pollitt at UF Health in Gainesville, Florida, and Brad was building multi-story new hospital towers, and he had 3 towers. At that point in time, probably 10 years ago, 250 million, 300 million. So you're talking large projects, and he spent a lot of effort and energy into creating a culture around the team, to create the high performing team. And he said it very well in the sense that as an owner, he was hiring potential, but then it was up to him to make sure that potential came through. And so an owner that has that kind of attitude, and I saw that response, through here, that the owner can have a very big impact on the culture of the team. But that doesn't have to start at the owner. We as contractors can also have a huge impact on the culture of the team. But really, the 3 keys that he would talk about that we incorporated into the projects we were doing is that trust, that communication, and accountability. One of the things that I saw early on was kind of creating expectations with the owner. And on any level, if you don't have clear expectations, you will not then have good accountability. It really starts with you being very clear on the expectations on what you're going to deliver. And really, again, if I'm going to take that first step, I'm going to do anything, let's set clear expectations. That's up and down and sideways. It's not just typically down. People think about delegating down. No, you can also ask and request and kind of lead up. And that can also kind of ask and request questions on kind of where do they want information coming from, and really doing the brief backs and understanding what the owner's expectations are of you. As you're doing that communication, you're building trust. As you're building trust, that also layers onto additional accountability. Peer-to-peer accountability is one of the highest forms of accountability you have. If I said to a friend, I'm going to help them out on a Saturday, I'm going to make sure I follow through with that because they trust that I am. It's my friend. There's so many different layers that go into that I don't want to let them down. If I don't have that relationship of a high performing team, you talk about the family lunches or getting together on a different level. If I don't have that same level of commitment personally, then it's easier to break that commitment and not follow through. So people think of these team building activities or getting to know someone as time wasters, or it's soft skills, or it doesn't matter, I need to go be putting things in place. In reality, is you're making some great deposits into that account, into that the social capital, and I kind of look at it as a bank account. I've got to put deposits into that account with that relationship, because when I make a withdrawal, I don't want to go negative. And so if I'm not taking the time to spend putting deposits into creating good and positive communication, to fostering the relationship side of it, getting to know the people, I'm not making deposits. And then when withdrawals come, I go negative, then the relationship breaks down, the team breaks down, my productivity breaks down. So it really, a lot of it stems from that. And the construction industry is so people focused. How many people do you have on a site of a major project at any time? You can go from 50 to 300 in a month period. But if those people aren't working together, it deteriorates. And it's felt from top down. So, how do we communicate that out? How do we set expectations? How do we then increase our accountability and trust throughout, and communicating in a way that is very clear? And we're going to leave you with a tool here today when we talk about high performing teams, and control what you can control. It's right there in the chat box. A lot of things we can't control on the construction site, we deal reactively with it. But what we can control is the types of relationships we have and how we set expectations and how we lead the site. And if we're doing that better, it has a higher probability of a successful project. And as we kind of look at it, it's how do we delegate out? And Dan's going to really kind of dive in. So it's a tool that we want to leave you with. It's really kind of that start point of setting expectations to create the trust, the communication, and the accountability that then fosters a high performing team and a great project. Dan?
Okay, thank you, Matt. So here are 2 tools that we get a lot of positive feedback on from our clients. We'll start on the left with the delegation model, then we'll get to the done model and show how they combine. So if you're like most, there have probably been times when you have delegated a task, an important task to somebody, and been somewhat disappointed at what you received in return. Matt, has that ever happened to you?
Never, ever.
Danielle, has that ever happened to you?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So we can promise you, and I don't use the word promise very often, but I'm using it here, that if you deploy this tool, the rates of that will go down dramatically. It's just a very good process. So I'm going to walk you through the 6 levels. I'm going to use a very simple example. Let's say it's circa 2020, and Matt comes to me and says, "Okay, Dan, I need you to research masks for me. I don't know if you've been paying attention to this COVID-19 thing, but it looks like we're going to need masks, and we're going to need them fast. So go research that for me." That's level 1. Matt's not asking me to think. He's just asking me essentially to go forage for food. Like, just bring anything back that you can. It's a very low level 1. Why would you ever use level 1? Well, maybe somebody's brand new and you're not sure what they're capable of. Maybe they've disappointed you a bunch of times and this is all they can handle. But level 1 should be rare, but it's there. It's part of the process. Level 2 is a pretty significant step up, because now Matt comes to me and says, "Hey, Dan, I need you to research mask vendors. So just give me like a top 2 or 3. So now he's trusting me to make some serious judgments on the 2 vendors or 3 vendors we should be looking at. And he won't even pay attention to anything beyond that. That's a big step up. You're asking people to think, use their critical thinking skills, and come back to you with potential options. Not one, but potential options. Now, level 3, now he's asking me to do it, or he's asking me to decide, excuse me. So in level 3, he's saying, "Dan, go out there, research this, and come back with your decision on which mask vendor we should use. But I want to understand your process. I want to understand how you arrived at it, what your due diligence was, and then I'll decide." So it's still Matt's decision, but he's really trusting my judgment at this point. Level 4, do it. Report the results. Level 5, hey, I only want to hear about this task if it needs to be escalated to me, if there's a problem. Otherwise, you don't even have to report results to me. Level 6, Dan, Matt says to me, "This is officially dead to me and very much alive to you. No matter what happens, you own this, lock, stock, and barrel. I'm out." Level 6, is it rare? Sure, it's rare, but it's there. Now, if I can, let's see if we can get if you guys to respond in the chat box. In levels 1 and 2, if there is a bottleneck, put in the chat box, who's the problem in levels 1 and 2? Is it Matt, the delegator, or me, the delegatee? If there's a bottleneck, where is that coming from, Matt or me? Because Matt's delegating. Anybody? Put it in the chat box or say it out loud. All right, so we got 1 vote for Dan. Okay, I'm afraid you're incorrect. On levels 1 and 2, Matt's delegating to me. So he is the bottleneck because Matt's making the decision. It's not me, right? On levels 4, 5, and 6, it changes, because on levels 4, 5, and 6, now I am the bottleneck because Matt has empowered me to make those decisions. But what about level 3? Who is the bottleneck on level 3? Anybody? By the way, Juan got it right. Jeremy says delegator. No one, Jim, you're close, but not really. If there's a bottleneck, it's both of us. Because on the one hand, I'm supposed to do my thing. Oh, there you go. Jim got it. And on the other hand, Matt is still in charge. So level 3 is a double bottleneck. That's a problem. But level 3 is really important because that's where Matt is evaluating me. Can Dan handle this? Should I bump him up to level 4 on these things, or should I bump him down to level 2? This is where Matt trains me. This is where he coaches me. Level 3 is a very important level. But the penalty is it is a double bottleneck. Now, why is this so important? Because most of us have defaults. Now, normally I get into the birds on this, Matt, but I'm not going to do it here. There are some of us who just roll out of bed in the morning and naturally delegate to a level 5. I'm one of those people. I just assume, because I'm an optimist, that the person I'm delegating to, they'll do a great job, no problem. But I'm also I'm not an in the weeds kind of person. I don't like to get in the weeds. And so hey, I hired you. You know what you're doing. You'll figure it out. I'm a level 5 guy. Is that a good thing? No, it creates all kinds of problems for me. And ask anybody who works for Velocity, they'll give you a story of me delegating at a level 5 when I should not have. Okay? Other folks, they default the opposite of me. They default to a level 2 because they are very conscientious in their approach, and they're careful and they're cautious, and they want to make sure that everything they do correctly, and therefore they want to make sure the person they're delegating to does everything correctly. And so they project their own nature onto another person, and when they delegate, they're on top of it. They're there. They're making sure that it actually happens. That's a default. So I'm curious if you could put in the chat box, do you have a default? And if so, what is your natural comfort level? Which of these? Which level? Do you default to 5, to 4, to 2? Anybody?
Yeah, what do you call your leadership style?
Well, my leadership style is abandonment. Which I probably shouldn't be so proud of, but okay, so Jeremy says level 2. Anybody else? If you don't know the person, you say level 2. So level 5. Okay, Juan's with me. Okay, so a couple of interesting things there. So first of all, this is not a people-centric model. It is a task-centric model. So I might, Matt might be able to delegate to me on level 5 on some things, but on lots of other things, he'd be foolish to do that, and he should delegate to a level 2. So be careful not to say, oh yeah, Joe is awesome. I can just delegate level 5 to Joe. We have a tendency of just, putting somebody in a bubble and saying that's who they are, and it's often not the case. So this is task specific. Okay, how do you actually use this tool? Because this is the best part. So Matt delegating something, let's say again, relatively complex to me. He says, okay, Dan, here's what I need you to do. Now, let me walk you through the 6 levels of delegation. And Matt walks me through it the way I just did with you. And he says, okay, here's what each of these levels mean. So tell me, Dan, Matt says, where are you most comfortable? And now I report to Matt, I have to go first. I have to say, you know what, Matt, I got this. I'm a level 5. And Matt smiles because there's no way he would delegate to me at a level 5 on this. But he asked me a question and I answered it. And so Matt smiles and said, hey, Dan, I love the confidence. That's why you're on the team. But I tell you what, now that I know that level 5 is what's in your head, let's get there. Let's make that happen. We're going to start at level 3. And let's say that by the end of this project or within a month or 2 on this type of role, you'll be at a level 5. And now a goal has been created that I can strive for. So pretty quick conversation. But Matt doesn't come to me and say, I'm your manager, here's your level. No, he asked me what I think first, and then we have that conversation. What does that accomplish? Anybody? In the chat box, what does it accomplish that we have this brief interaction? Anybody?
They're furiously typing right now.
Are they? Aligns expectations on how you're interacting. Yes, it's kind of a big deal because often, folks, we delegate, we have an idea in our heads, right? but we don't necessarily communicate it. Good interaction gets the delegatee to engage with the results. Yes, you get so much bang for the buck when you do this, and it's so brief. It's so brief. Now, I'm going to give you, I'm going to tell you, I got to give you an example because it has the benefit of being true. And it just kind of blew me away. So I'm coaching this executive, and she's got this direct report, and he's driving her crazy, and she can't figure out why. He's a good guy, he's hardworking, but she just doesn't like him. And a little bit later in, I take her through the delegation model. Here are the 6 levels. And so she sits down with Justin, who's a millennial, younger millennial, and she said, okay, Justin, here's what I need you to do. Here are the 6 levels. What do you think? And Justin looks at her and says, level 0. And my client, she said, Dan, I could like feel the bile like rising up in my gut. It's like, keep it down, keep it down. And so she kept her cool and she said, okay, Justin, why did you say level 0? That's not on here. And Justin said, well, I assume that when you delegate something to me, we're going to do it together. And she said to me, it was like a thunderclap, like exploded over her head. It's like, this is why I can't stand the guy. He doesn't even understand what the word delegation means. He thinks everything is a group activity. And it never even occurred to her that he would have, you don't know what's in people's heads until you ask them. And by the way, their relationship improved dramatically because she taught him what the word meant. And then she climbed him up that ladder on task after task. Okay. We can promise you, we're sending you this as a PDF, that if you start using this immediately on everything that you delegate, your delegation will improve, your execution will improve, and the people around you will feel that you're a better communicator. Because you will be.
You'll be setting those clear expectations to get to the accountability you're really after.
Yeah. Okay. So now we go to the right side. We go to the done model. So what's that? Well, this is just a checklist. Did you, in fact, clearly define the goal? There's only one way to find out, and that's to have them paraphrase back to you what the goal actually is. And you want to be careful about that. You don't want to treat someone like they're a dope and they can't listen. So you just say, hey, listen, I want to make sure that I'm communicating effectively here. Can you paraphrase back to me your understanding of what the goal is, just so that I know that I did a good job? Make it about you, not about them. But until they tell you, they can just nod their head and smile, but you don't really know what's going on there. Okay. Did you organize responsibility? Maybe you've got a project, you got 5 people involved. Guess what? If you use this model on the left, delegation model, each one of them may have a different level. Person A is at level 5. Person B is at level 2. If you're really going to take this seriously and try to maximize their potential while at the same time developing them, that's how you want to do it. It's not one size fits all. So did you organize the responsibility? Is there a deadline? Matt, I would imagine in this world, deadlines are like totally routine and natural and normal, right? Everybody provides
Absolutely.
them? Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay. But yeah, I tell you what, you'd be surprised in other industries, people don't put deadlines out. I blows my mind too, but it does happen. So is there a verifiable deadline? Okay. Matt, what's the difference between an outcome and a goal?
Outcome is what you expect it to be. A goal is what you want to achieve.
Okay, cool. I like that. Anybody else? What's the difference between a goal and an outcome? Any takers? Any brave souls out there? Nothing? Okay. So I like what Matt just said, but I think of it a little differently. A goal is aspirational. Interesting. I think of the outcome as what I like to call commander's intent. So the commander's intent is to keep the enemy from getting from point A to point B. But the goal was to blow up the bridge. So, you parachute in the dead of night to get to that bridge so that you can blow it up. That's your goal. Okay. But you get there and it's been raining for a week and all of the explosives that were placed there prior to you, they got wet. And now you can't blow up the bridge. But if you know the commander's intent, which is keep the enemy from getting to the other side, well, you can find another goal to achieve that. So you start a fire. You find some other way to misdirect the enemy away from crossing that to the other side. That's the difference. The younger an employee is, the more, they're Gen Z or a younger millennial, the more excited they get when you connect the dots for them on how their little task impacts the bigger picture. It's a big deal to them because every young person wants to make an impact. They're always using the word impact. I want to make an impact. They want to feel like they matter, like they're important. And very often when they're just doing, a small menial task, they feel like they're wasting their own time. Seriously, you don't know who I am? I got a college degree. Like, come on, I could do more, right? And when you can attach what they're doing, which might seem insignificant to them, to the fact that it's actually really significant, you motivate them. And so establishing the outcome is really important when you're communicating with folks and getting them as engaged as you'd like them to be. So, do we have the slide where we combine the two? Yes. Just when you thought we were done, there's more. Okay. At levels 1 and 2, the done model is very literal. It's just literal. You tell them exactly what you want, exactly how you want it, and it's just very basic. But look what happens when you get to level 4. Now, you're not so much telling them what to do as having a discussion. Now Matt's saying to me, hey, Dan, what do you think about this outcome? How would you get to this outcome? Or here's our outcome. What are the lead-up goals that you think are most likely to hit that outcome? Now Matt's trying to really get me to own this thing, as opposed to him just dumping it on my lap and spelling it out for me. So this is where delegation becomes empowerment. And that level 3 is the key intermediary, where Matt's saying to me, you know what, I'm going to invest in you a little bit here. I'm going to spend some time to get you to think the way I want you to think so that we can get you to levels 4, 5, and 6. So we are sending you these materials. We strongly encourage that you give them a shot because our clients love it. We just get tons of positive feedback on this. That's
So absolutely. We kind of go back to the trust, communication, and accountability and the 3 kind of key ingredients. That tool wraps all those in because you're expressing trust, through that as you move them up that ladder. They're gaining that in you. The communication, the accountability, again, setting expectations to have that accountability and then clearly communicating. So as we kind of wrap up here, we talk about communication. There's many ways to communicate. I know Team Engine has some great ways to facilitate communication throughout your teams.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quickly on that. I mean, so much of everything that we've covered today ties back to communication, ties back to really creating a culture of communication. And there was some talk about culture, and I think it's really important to invest in that culture of communication because it then becomes a competitive advantage. Because somebody said at the beginning of the presentation, one of the challenges is workers chasing dollars. That's because company A raises their pay wage, then company B will do the same, and workers will chase that dollar. But another company cannot just copy your culture. And as you can tell, this creating this culture of communication takes time, effort, and energy. You're not going to just flip a switch and be amazing at it. It's going to take effort and work and practice to get there. But the other point I wanted to make was to tie it into Team Engine. All of these things can be done manually on your own, but it begins to be a challenge as a company begins to grow and scale. All these conversations are best had in person, face to face, sit down and have a communication session with your staff so you can see their facial expressions and their vocal inflections, and that's where the real magic happens. But it's not always possible, right? Especially as your workers are distributed and out in the field and you're up against deadlines. And so it's not always possible to have those conversations face to face, and that's where Team Engine comes into play. We also talked about technology adoption. That's one of the benefits of using Team Engine to communicate with your workforce is there is no adoption. It's sending text messages from the software out to your workers. And maybe it's just a, kind of prompting that we need to sit down and have one of these conversations. Or maybe you can't have the huddle, you can't be there for the huddle at the end of the day. You can send those electronic communications via Team Engine, and then it just shows up. They don't have to check their email, they don't have to log into an app, it's just right there in their text messages. So if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, in the email that I'll be sending later today with the recording and the handout, there will also be an opportunity to sign up for a free trial of Team Engine, and check it out, kick the tires for a week or so, and see if it might be helpful at your organization.
Well,
did you have more?
Yeah, Dan, anything in closing?
No, I'm good. Hopefully, we've shared some thoughts with you that make your life a little bit easier, a little bit better. And please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, Danielle, myself, or Matt. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom here. I love the engagement. Thank you to our attendees as well for participating. It's really valuable to get that information from those of you out there in the field, and so that was helpful. And all the way down to the models, I feel like there's a lot of high level conversation, but that model is really helpful, because then how do we put all this into action and start practicing it? So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for sharing. Thank you to everyone else for attending, and keep an eye out for that email. I will send you the recording as well as the model, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.